I thought my marriage was perfect until I found secret messages on my wife's phone, and when I confronted her, I discovered a truth that changed everything forever. I never thought I'd be the type of person to write out my life like this, but the truth is that some stories feel too heavy to keep locked inside your chest. I always imagined my marriage would be one of those boring, stable ones. Quiet dinners, shared inside jokes, a little bickering about the laundry, but nothing too dramatic. My wife, Claire, and I had been together for 7 years, married for 5, and from the outside looking in, we probably looked like one of those couples people assumed would last forever. She had this calm, warm presence that drew people to her, and I was the more introverted, detail-oriented one. Always making sure the bills were paid on time and the small things didn't fall through the cracks. We balanced each other out. At least, I thought we did. The first time I noticed something was off, it wasn't because of some dramatic Hollywood sign like lipstick on a collar or hushed phone calls late at night. It was smaller, subtle. Claire had started smiling at her phone in a way that felt different. The kind of smile she used to reserve for me when I sent her something stupid or when I surprised her with flowers. At first, I brushed it off. People are allowed to have private jokes with friends, right? But it started happening more often, and soon the glow of her screen seemed to mean more to her than I did. I tried not to let paranoia take over. Every article online warns you about becoming the jealous, controlling spouse, and I didn't want to be that guy. Still, the seed of suspicion had been planted. One night, after she went to bed early claiming a headache, I found myself alone in the living room staring at her phone, which was sitting unlocked on the armrest. I don't know what came over me. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would wake her up, but my hands moved almost on their own. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, just enough to reassure myself I was imagining things. What I found didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. There were text messages, dozens of them, with someone saved simply as A. They weren't overtly sexual, not at first glance, but they were intimate. Things like, "I can't stop thinking about yesterday," and "I wish we could have more time, just the two of us." And Claire's responses were full of heart emojis, little jokes, and the kind of playfulness she hadn't given me in months. My stomach turned as I scrolled further, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The messages dated back weeks, maybe months. I couldn't believe it. This was Claire, the woman who swore up and down that honesty was the foundation of everything. The woman who had lectured me once when I forgot to tell her I had lunch with a female coworker. My mind spiraled. Was A someone she worked with? Someone I knew? Every name I could think of started flashing in my brain like neon signs, and with each possibility came a new wave of nausea. I didn't confront her right away. I wish I could say I stormed into the bedroom and demanded answers, but the truth is I froze. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, crawled into bed beside her, and stared at the ceiling in silence. I told myself I needed to be smart about this, that I needed more proof before blowing up our entire life. But the truth was simpler. I was terrified. Terrified of the answer, terrified of being right, terrified of admitting that the life I thought I had might already be gone. Over the next few days, I watched her with new eyes. Every time she smiled at her phone, my chest tightened. Every time she said she was working late, I found myself doubting her. I started checking our shared credit card statements, scanning for charges I couldn't explain. Once, I noticed a receipt from a cafe on the other side of town, a place we'd never been together. When I casually asked her about it, she hesitated just a fraction too long before saying she'd grabbed lunch there with coworkers. Maybe she was telling the truth, but by then I was too far gone. Every word out of her mouth felt like a performance. One night, she left her laptop open, and I caught a glimpse of an email draft she hadn't sent yet. It was written to A, and the words hit me harder than any fist could. I hate lying to him, but I can't stay away from you. I don't think I breathed for a full minute after reading that. My world collapsed into a sharp, ringing silence. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. I thought about the life we'd built together, the vacations, the dinners with friends, the whispered promises in the dark, and all I could see was a lie unraveling in slow motion. And yet, part of me clung to hope. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this wasn't physical. Maybe it was just some emotional thing that hadn't crossed the line. My rational brain tried to find loopholes, while my heart screamed the truth. She was cheating. I had to make a decision. Do I confront her now, with nothing but fragments and circumstantial proof, or do I wait, gather more evidence, and corner her with undeniable truth. The thought of dragging this out was unbearable. But so was the thought of facing her and hearing her confirm what I already knew. That night, staring at the cold kitchen tiles, I made myself a promise. I was going to find out the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. The promise I made to myself that night in the kitchen kept echoing in my head. Every look Claire gave me, every casual excuse she offered, became fuel for my suspicion. I started documenting things, screenshots of texts, timestamps of when she said she'd be home, little notes scribbled in the margins of a notebook I kept hidden in my desk drawer. It was obsessive, I know, but I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. If I didn't keep track, I'd start second-guessing myself. Gaslighting is subtle, and even if Claire wasn't actively doing it, my brain was more than capable of twisting itself into knots to protect me from the truth. Then came the Friday night that broke everything open. She'd told me she was staying late for a project deadline. But something about the way she grabbed her purse, a little too quickly, set my nerves on fire. After she left, I sat there, staring at the front door, until my own reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger glaring back at me. That's when I made a decision that I'm not proud of. I followed her. I told myself I just needed peace of mind, that I wasn't planning some grand confrontation. But when I parked a few streets down from the cafe receipt I'd found earlier, and I saw her car already there, my stomach dropped. I sat in my car for a full 15 minutes, hands clenching and unclenching the steering wheel, before I finally convinced myself to get out. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out, but somehow my legs carried me inside, and there she was. Sitting at a corner table, leaning forward, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Across from her was a man I'd never met before, dark hair, broad shoulders, the kind of charisma that made people lean closer without realizing it. He reached across the table, brushed his hand over hers, and she didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She smiled. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled until all I could see was their hands touching. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists into the table, to demand answers right there in front of everyone. But instead, I just stood frozen by the door like some stranger watching a movie about his own life. My legs eventually carried me backward, out onto the street where the cold air hit me like a slap. I sat in my car, staring blankly at the dashboard, until finally, I drove home in silence. When she came back that night, her hair smelled faintly of the same cafe coffee I'd noticed on the receipt weeks before. She slid into bed beside me, kissed my shoulder, and whispered, "Long day." I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. Long day. She had no idea I'd seen everything. I lay there stiff as a board, pretending to be half asleep, and realized I couldn't do this anymore. The next morning, I asked her straight out, "Claire, are you seeing someone else?" My voice cracked halfway through the question, but I held her gaze. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear, maybe, or guilt. Then she laughed, a brittle, nervous sound, and said, "Of course not. Why would you even think that?" That was the moment something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery, and shoved the blurry picture I'd taken of her, and the mystery man across the table at her. The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost frightening. For a second, she didn't say anything, just stared. Then she whispered, "You followed me." As if that was the real crime here. The argument that followed was the ugliest fight of our marriage. She yelled. I yelled louder. Words we could never take back ricocheted off the walls of our kitchen. She tried to spin it as just a friendship, but when I pressed harder, when I asked about the texts and the emails, her defenses crumbled. It wasn't supposed to happen, she admitted finally, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Hearing her admit it didn't bring the relief I thought it would. It wasn't cathartic. It was like swallowing glass. She confessed that it had been going on for a few months, that she'd met him at work during a joint project, that he understood her in ways she felt I no longer did. That line almost broke me. After everything we'd shared, everything we'd built, she threw it all away because someone else made her feel understood. I wanted to throw her out right then and there. Part of me wanted to pack her bags myself and leave them on the porch, but another part, the part that still loved her despite everything, kept me rooted to the chair. I asked her if she loved him. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I found my answer. The following days were a blur. We barely spoke. Meals were eaten in silence. Nights were spent on opposite sides of the bed, our backs turned to each other like two strangers forced to share a room. I started crashing on the couch just to avoid the suffocating tension. At work, I caught myself staring blankly at my computer screen, the words blurring until they meant nothing. My boss asked if I was okay, and all I could do was nod because how do you explain this kind of betrayal in casual conversation? Eventually, Claire suggested counseling. We owe it to ourselves to try, she said, her eyes rimmed red from crying. A part of me wanted to scream that she should have thought about what we owed each other before she climbed into someone else's arms. But another part, the stubborn, loyal, hopeful part, nodded. Because maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to salvage. So we went. The first few sessions were brutal. Raw wounds ripped open again and again. The counselor asked questions I didn't want to answer, forced us to confront things I would have preferred to bury. Claire swore she'd cut contact with him, that she'd do whatever it took to earn back my trust. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But late one night, after another exhausting session, I caught her in the bathroom, her phone glowing in the dark. When I asked who she was texting, she said it was her sister. The lie rolled off her tongue too easily. And that's when the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When you realize the person you love is still lying to you, even after swearing to stop, something changes inside you. It's not like flipping a switch, it's slower, more insidious. Trust doesn't just vanish in a single breath, it rots from the inside out, leaving everything hollow. That night, when I caught Claire texting in the bathroom and she claimed it was her sister, I knew she hadn't cut ties with him, no matter what she promised in therapy. She wasn't ready to let him go, and I wasn't ready to keep living like this. I didn't call her out right away. Instead, I started planning. Quietly, deliberately, I began moving some money into a separate account, just in case. I dug out a box of old documents, marriage certificate, mortgage paperwork, insurance policies, and tucked them into a folder I kept locked in my desk at work. I wasn't sure if I was preparing for divorce or just bracing for impact, but it gave me a strange sense of control in a life that suddenly felt completely out of mine. Claire, for her part, acted like nothing was wrong. She'd make small talk at breakfast, ask about my day, even suggest movie nights like we used to have. It was surreal, almost like living in a play where both of us had memorized the wrong scripts. I'd sit there, watching her laugh at some scene on TV, and think she's still lying. She's sitting here, pretending everything's fine, and in a few hours, she'll probably sneak away to text him again. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. I was supposed to be out late for work, but a meeting got canceled last minute. I didn't tell Claire. I wanted to surprise her, maybe even test whether she was really serious about fixing things. When I walked through the door, the house was silent except for the faint hum of her voice. She was in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, smiling that smile again. I stood in the hallway, listening. "I miss you too," she whispered. "It's just complicated right now. He suspects something." The world stopped. My chest burned as if someone had pressed a branding iron against it. She wasn't just texting him. She was still actively maintaining the affair, still feeding him the intimacy she was supposed to share with me. I stepped into the living room, and the look on her face when she saw me standing there will be etched into my memory forever. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, and for once she had no quick lie ready. "Hang up," I said, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. She fumbled with the phone, disconnected the call, and just sat there frozen. I didn't yell this time. I didn't throw things or demand explanations. I just told her I was done. "I can't do this anymore, Claire. You chose him, and I can't fight for someone who doesn't want to be here." Her tears started instantly, messy and panicked. She begged. She said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean it, that she was just confused. She grabbed at my hands, tried to make me look at her, but I couldn't. My mind was already miles away, picturing a life where I didn't have to play detective in my own home, where I didn't have to measure every smile and every text against the possibility of betrayal. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not the couch, the actual spare bed we usually reserved for visiting family. It felt symbolic, like I was drawing a physical line between us. Claire cried herself to sleep in our room, but I didn't go to her. For the first time since I discovered the affair, I felt something close to clarity. The days that followed were brutal. We had conversations that felt like picking at open wounds. She begged for another chance, promised she'd cut him off, for real this time, but her words meant nothing anymore. They were just sounds in the air, stripped of weight. The counselor tried to mediate, but I could tell even she sensed it. The foundation had crumbled beyond repair. And yet, despite everything, walking away wasn't easy. We had a history, we had mutual friends, shared routines, 1,000 little threads tying our lives together. Divorce isn't just about two people. It's about unraveling an entire web. I'd lie awake at night thinking about splitting holidays, dividing furniture, explaining to everyone why our picture-perfect marriage had collapsed. Shame sat heavy on my chest. Then came the final nail in the coffin. One Saturday morning, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't mean to look, but the preview of the message lit up the screen, plain as day. "I love you. I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore." I didn't even bother scrolling further. That one line was enough. Enough to shatter the tiny sliver of doubt still clinging to me. She hadn't just betrayed me, she was planning a future with him. When she came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, I was already packing a bag. She froze in the doorway, dripping water onto the floor. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said simply. "For good this time." For her face crumpled, and she dropped the towel, rushing over to me. She clung to my arm, sobbing, begging me not to go. But I kept packing, one shirt after another, methodically folding them into the suitcase, as if each one were a brick sealing the wall between us. When I finally zipped it up, the sound was final, sharp. I walked out that door without looking back, her cries echoing behind me. My heart was breaking, but it was also the first time in months that I felt free. Leaving that house was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not because I doubted my choice, I didn't, but because the act itself felt like tearing off a piece of myself and walking away from it. The silence in the car as I drove to my brother's apartment was deafening. Every mile I put between myself and Claire was like a war being fought inside me, grief on one side, relief on the other. The first few nights were rough. I'd lie awake on his pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of the past year. The texts, the lies, the smell of coffee from that cafe. I'd ask myself over and over, how did I not see it sooner? How did I miss the signs? But self-blame only takes you so far before it poisons you. And slowly, I started realizing something important. Her cheating wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of hers. Still, grief doesn't follow logic. There were mornings when I almost reached for my phone to text her about some silly meme or a frustrating moment at work. Our lives had been so intertwined that cutting her out felt unnatural, like amputating a limb and still expecting to move your hand. I had to retrain my brain not to think of her as my safe place. Therapy helped, even if I hated going at first. Sitting across from a stranger and admitting that my marriage had collapsed because my wife cheated. It stripped me raw. But every session gave me back a piece of myself. Claire tried to contact me at first. Dozens of calls. Long, emotional emails. She said she'd ended it with him for real this time, that she couldn't imagine life without me. Maybe she even believed it. But I was done. I didn't block her immediately. It took me weeks. But eventually I realized that healing meant cutting off the infection at the source. When I hit block, for the last time, it felt like lifting a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. Divorce was messy, as everyone warned me it would be. Papers, negotiations, arguments over who got what. At one point, Claire begged for mediation instead of lawyers, claiming she wanted to keep it civil. But civility had been gone the moment she chose someone else over me. In the end, I kept the car and a modest share of the savings. She kept the house, which was fine by me. It was filled with too many ghosts anyway. What surprised me most was how supportive people were once the truth came out. I dreaded telling friends and family, expecting judgment or awkward pity, but instead they rallied around me. My mom cooked me dinners I didn't ask for. My friends dragged me out for beers and made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. Even my boss, usually a gruff, no-nonsense guy, quietly adjusted my workload so I'd have breathing room. For the first time in months, I felt less alone. The turning point came one evening when I was walking home from work. I passed by a park I hadn't visited in years, and something about the fading sunlight filtering through the trees stopped me. I sat down on a bench and just breathed. No phone buzzing, no pit in my stomach, no lies gnawing at the edges of my reality. Just me, the quiet, and the realization that I was still here, still alive, still capable of building something new. It wasn't an instant transformation. Healing never is. Some days I still woke up angry or sad or hollow, but other days I felt lighter, even hopeful. I started running again, something I'd given up during the chaos of my marriage. At first, I couldn't even make it a mile without gasping for breath, but each run got easier, and with each step, I felt stronger. It became a metaphor for my life, painful at first, but slowly building endurance, resilience, and momentum. Months later, I bumped into an old friend at a coffee shop. The kind of coincidence you don't plan but somehow feels like fate. We started catching up, talking about everything from work to movies to ridiculous high school memories. For the first time in a long time, I laughed without it feeling forced. We exchanged numbers, and while I wasn't ready to call it dating, it felt like a door cracking open, just a sliver of light after a long time in the dark. As I sit here now, writing this all out, I realize that what I thought was the end of my world was really just the end of a chapter. Claire's betrayal nearly destroyed me, but it also forced me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored for years. I learned how strong I can be when I have no choice but to stand alone. I learned that love doesn't mean tolerating lies. And I learned that sometimes, letting go is the bravest thing you can do. The story doesn't tie up with a neat little bow. Claire is still out there, living her life, and I'll probably never fully understand why she chose to cheat instead of facing our problems head on. But I've stopped needing that answer. What matters is that I'm no longer waiting for her apologies or her promises to make me whole. I've started making myself whole again, and maybe, just maybe, that's the real happy ending. Not reconciliation, not revenge, but the quiet, steady rediscovery of who I am without her.